Please welcome to the stage Professor Jeff Jarvis, David Rogers, Brandon Evans, Sam Decker, and Dan Greenberg.
Good afternoon. We're going late, so I'm going to talk really fast. We're trying to get blood pressure going up in this session. We're trying to say outrageous things, get you pissed off, get you challenging things, get you trying to outdo them in terms of outrageous statements about the future. That's where we're going to go. My friend Sam Decker here is going to be checking Twitter. When I've watched Twitter at conferences, it's turned into a really boring role of quote after quote after quote, which is wonderful. Don't use it that way here. You do that too, that's fine. But I want you to use Twitter to make challenges, to throw out even more outrageous ideas, to say stop, and give facts straight whenever you want, all right? So we're going to start with 3 outrageous statements, and we are going to then go and talk about those very briefly, and then come out and I will run around like Oprah with my head cut off to have you challenge these folks to try to outdo them with outrageous predictions for where the world goes, okay? Yeah. Okay. My friend David Rogers, why don't you introduce yourself real quickly? You are?
David Rogers. I teach digital marketing strategy at Columbia Business School and executive programs. And my most recent book was The Network is Your Customer.
And the question to put to you is social media ROI bullshit?
I think you edited the last word of the question, but I'm going to go with yes.
Okay. Simple. That was it.
That's it.
Oh, okay. Next, introduce yourself and wow them.
Hi, I'm Brandon Evans. I'm CEO and founder of Crowdtap. We are a social engagement platform that helps brands develop deep relationships with their most passionate consumers.
And your outrageous sense is?
So I believe that, and we believe that influencers don't matter, at least the way we're currently thinking about influencers online. When you're thinking about who actually moves the needle for your product, we focus on what we call peer influencers, which is really all of us, and really most decisions are made based on trusting those close personal networks, and really figuring out how to scale that is what's really key, not identifying those people with a lot of followers or high cloud scores.
So far, ROI is bullshit, influencers are bullshit. We're going to get even more than that right here. Dan, introduce yourself and what you have to say.
Advertising is bullshit.
Yeah.
No, that's not my point of view. I'm Dan Greenberg, CEO, founder of a company called Sharethrough. What we do is we work with brands like Coke, Pepsi, Nike to help them distribute branded video content across native ad placements. So we're a native ad company based in San Francisco, about 100 employees now.
Okay, so let's go dig a little bit further into these 3 ideas, and then we'll come out and talk to
Well, give my point of view.
Everybody else.
I gotta have my point of view.
You go ahead and you do yours first.
So my point of view, what I want to talk about today, is this thesis that Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Tumblr, WordPress, Spotify, every major platform you can say, has all said no to traditional advertising. I'm going to use this.
What do they say again? Go ahead, show it high. What do they say?
They're saying this to traditional advertising. YouTube does pre-roll, but past that, nobody's doing display. And so I think my thesis and what I wanted to talk about was that if I fast forward 5 years, 2 years, 10 years, I don't know how far, but if you fast forward, the traditional publishers like Wall Street Journal, New York Times, NBC, Atlantic, Forbes, they're going to pick up that exact same native ad model, part and parcel to their sites, not banners in the corners. And those banners may still exist, but that thesis I think is an interesting one. You take it from Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and that same philosophy brought to the traditional publishing web.
Just to play a little bit more, the way I've been putting it is that advertising is dead. I don't really mean that because I wanted to pay for my students as journalism students, but that advertising is failure. That if you have a great relationship with a customer for your product or service, if they love it, if they talk about it, that's the ideal. The reason to advertise is if that doesn't work. Is that related to what you're saying?
I would disagree with that. I think big brands can spend billions of dollars advertising. They just need to do so thoughtfully. I think I would put it differently that interruption is dead.
Okay.
And interruption to me, forcing me to spend time with something I actually don't care about, that model, we're going to look back on that in 10 years and think, I don't know how we let that happen for so long, because it just doesn't make any sense.
Is the message dead?
Is the message dead? Brands can be storytellers. No, I think brands can create good content, and brands can distribute it through paid ad placements and spend billions of dollars buying attention, but they can't buy forced attention.
Right. Okay. Brandon, say a little more about your view here. Expand on it a little bit.
Sure. I think the key is, when really thinking about how content, how people make decisions. When you think about what you put in your cart at the grocery store, in the drugstore, how you buy fashion, how you think about anything. Those decisions, study over study, is saying that those come from your peers, your close personal networks. And so I think, advertisers have gotten kind of caught up in this model of, who's this perfect person who can influence my product. And that may have some merit. I think it's more of a media and ad buy. It's just kind of putting stuff out there and getting impressions. But if you're really talking about influence and the meaning of the word, which is to change people's decisions, change how people think about buying products, that influence still happens in close social networks. And I think we share a lot more content with those networks. So you see things like Pinterest, obviously Facebook. You're continually discovering new products. So really brands need to really become a part of that and figure out a way to become a part of those everyday conversations on a more regular basis.
And don't you also say that it's very conditional based on context, based on the person, that somebody who's influential to me is not influential to you, somebody who's authoritative to me is not authoritative to you,
yeah.
and all this effort to score and say we found the most influential person is, pardon me, bullshit.
Right,
Okay.
Exactly. And product by product it changes. I sometimes use this joke that you have Robert Scoble, who's very influential, or shares a lot of content about technology, but I'm certainly not going to decide how I dress or what my fashion sense is from Robert Scoble. I think.
Yeah, I can see he didn't know. Yeah.
From Brian Solis, maybe though.
Maybe Brian Solis. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, good fashion.
All right, David, you just saw a big presentation about trying to calculate the ROI on social, right?
Right.
The good professor, you're disagreeing, professor to professor?
Well, here's why I picked the side. You asked me to pick one side or the other. Is it ridiculous or not? And really, my problem is with how we as marketers are talking about social media and ROI. Fundamentally, I'd say 3 problems. One is it's ridiculous because most of us do not know what ROI is. And we are abusing the term and embarrassing ourselves in front of the finance department. And when we don't know what it means, we're making up our own definitions, slotting them in, saying things like engagement.
Is it badly done or is it impossible to calculate ROI?
Well, so that's the second point. ROI is a fine metric, but it's not a realistic metric in many cases. Okay, if you really try to understand what ROI is, it's a formula. You need 2 inputs. The bottom input is a little easier. It's what did you invest? The top input can be extremely hard. What's the marginal profit return to your company? And the fact, if we just treat that as, well, that would be a great metric, let's always set that as our goal. In some cases, that's realistic. In some cases, it frankly isn't. In other cases, you're maybe going to get a very rough approximation.
Okay, but I'm still confused about one thing. A company at the end of the day has to calculate ROI, has to calculate what efforts are worth it. Or are you saying that if a company becomes truly social, where it has real relationships with people, that's not an investment, that's just doing business?
No, I think anything, people sometimes debate this on the grounds of they'll say, what's the ROI on calling my mother on the weekends, right? They'll say, I don't know what the ROI is, but I do it anyway, because I should. Yeah, but you're not asking anybody for $1 million budget to call your mom on the weekend. Mm-hmm. If you are, then you need to put some argument behind it. But there's a distinction between marketing effectiveness and variety of key performance indicators, which businesses may be using, and ROI, which is a generally accepted accounting term. So I think we want to make a distinction between financial metrics, engagement metrics, channel-specific engagement metrics versus universal engagement metrics, and audience metrics.
I'm coming out in 1 second, and I want you to have hands ready and challenges ready. But isn't the danger of what you're saying, people will say, okay, then social is bullshit, I won't bother with it.
No, I didn't say social is ridiculous.
Okay.
So to answer your question more thoroughly, the way that we talk about ROI in regards to social today is ridiculous.
Okay, good. Who out here?
Yeah, I'm not seeing the challenges come in from you. So I know there's people on Twitter. I see them coming in. Let's hear.
This is like that horrible first moment in class when nobody raises their hand. Come on.
This is your chance to challenge. Give a stat.
Otherwise, you're going to get way back on schedule way fast.
What you've done.
Yes. Oh, okay. You have to be the farthest away. Where are you? Okay. Good. Of course.
Farthest spot in the room.
Okay. Please ID yourself.
George Galati of Us. Aren't we all just old hacks who figured out this is a good way to make some heavy bucks?
Anyone?
What was the question?
Well, what's the this? Wait. No. What's the this?
The this for what? Aren't we all just opportunistic that this is a high-income field? We're at the start of a wave, and as soon as something better comes, we'll all jump off onto something else.
What is that next thing, sir?
I don't know what the next thing is, but I've been told that the year of mobile is every year since I've been in social.
Is it just a fad, folks?
Well, I'm sure that was said about TV and other media when the internet back in the early days, when things just launched. I mean, I think the timing of things can never fully be determined. To your point on mobile, I mean, I was at online consulting. I was at Sapient kind of in the late 90s, and we were figuring out kind of mobile strategy, and we were talking about location-based services and mobile wallet and things that still haven't fully emerged, but they do happen. I think it's just a matter of timing, and I think you see things happening much quicker now. I think you see how fast social developed and the number of providers, the number of different solutions, and how impactful it's been to businesses, just because that's where people's time has quickly moved to. So I think if you follow people's time, you follow their attention, you're going to arrive around the right place. I don't think anyone's figured out the perfect solutions yet, and I think those come with testing, those come with brands being open to get involved and learn. And I think brands really need to function a lot more like technology companies do, which is short iterations, figuring things out, and pivoting and moving and trying out a lot of different solutions. I think if you try to kind of get everything right, like you would for a 60-second spot, you're just not going to get in the business, and you're going to
So
fail.
wait, we have a good tweet from Ted. Where are you, Ted? I know you're in the room. There you are, back there. Okay. So Ted says here, forget social media and think social process. Thoughts and reactions to that. And think forget social media ROI and think social process.
Well, isn't that like calling your mother a social process, right? It's about relationships. I've been arguing in the news business that we have to get out of the mind that we're in the content business, content selling business, and realize that Facebook and Google et al. Are in the relationship business, and that we have no mechanism to do that. And so what I think I hear you saying is if companies truly get into a real human relationship with someone, that's beyond advertising, no? Dan.
I would jump in to tie together both those previous points. And the gentleman in the back, just for the sake of the debate, I'll actually agree with you a little bit. That I think everybody in this room, our job is to sort of duck and jive with the changes in the market. And whether we're talking about the buzzword of social media or we're talking about whatever comes next, micro-targeting or whatever comes next after that, micro-persuasion, human-to-human, whatever it's going to be, our job is to just sort of duck and jive with this flow. So where we're at today is that whether you call it social media or native advertising or social process, something has fundamentally changed with people. And people will change again in 5 years, and they'll change again in another 5 years. But if it comes back to that point of everybody in this room, how we engage with brands, whether we engage with them in news feeds, reading their news, or whether we engage with them because we're an influencer and we choose to tap ourselves into the flow, whatever that is, people have never done that before, at least not on scale and not in a trackable way that they can expand on and run with.
Just a small challenge. The people didn't change. The capability of the company to listen is what changed, isn't it? Or talk, or converse.
Behavior change. Human behavior has changed. It's changed because now we have more control. In terms of engaging with media, we just have more control.
I think the advertiser's role in all that, completely changed. I mean, it used to be all they could do was push out messaging via TV, and the only way you learned about new products was you got hit over the head with some message. Now you're discovering stuff everywhere in your Facebook feed, in Pinterest, from friends. That information is all around you, so that just fundamentally changes where you hear about products, and advertising has to change.
Go ahead.
Back to the ROI comments. I think that I saw Gary Vaynerchuk speak, and at first I think a lot of brands were knowing that they had to be on social media, but they couldn't measure it. And he had a good comment where he said, "What's the ROI on your mom?" So it was hard to prove, but now, we're in the ad tech business, and I think that brands, it's becoming necessary for them to measure ROI. And with partnerships now and technologies, you can actually measure that. You can do path to conversion, you can measure own to paid. So I think now we actually can measure that return on investment. So I would.
Yeah,
you know,
I
I object to
so
your
a couple responses to that. First of all, so as I think I indicated, I fundamentally disagree with Gary's analogy, because again, you're not asking for a multi-million-dollar budget to love your mother, right? So it's not the same decision-making process. Basically, I see organizations, businesses going through a path which I sometimes call from if to how to why. So we started with businesses asking this question, talking about, well, if I did something in social media, what would it be? Or, well, if we try a mobile initiative, what should that be? And now the same organizations have gotten to the point for, well, okay, we know we've got to be here. Everybody's there. Our consumers are there. So how should we engage in, social media, for example? And the next stage is businesses are now starting to get to the stage of why. All right, we're there. We've been investing. We're using Tumblr, Facebook, Twitter, and so forth. Why are we doing this? What's the impact on our organization, on our businesses? That tends to be defined in terms of, to Jeff's point, relationships. I think in some cases, and I think it's a good goal, you may try to define that if you can as an ROI number. Even in the finance world, ROI is known as a very slippery figure because inevitably you've got a lot of confounding factors. Unless you've really got a control situation. Here's a great example. eBay, I know one of the things they do with digital advertising is they always spend 10% of their money purely on a control group. Right? So therefore they're buying a lot of display ads. 10% of the people they give the ad to instead see a public service announcement. Smokey the Bear, don't start forest fires. Now they have a clean control group, randomly distributed, and they can see if they're tracking with cookies whether people purchase within the next 30 days, an actual random comparison between those who saw their ad and those who did not. Now you can actually measure the top line of the ROI equation. If you've got a situation where you've got something like a social media online community and you're tracking between engagement to lead generation to sales, you need to build that kind of model. One thing is it's going to vary from company to company. That's a very important approach. At the end of the day, you're linking a lot of correlations. You're going to have a certain amount of statistical error in your final figure, but it's take it, okay? It's good enough to go. But we need to be mature and honest and grown up about the difference between knowing ROI on a real direct response medium, having an approximation based on a messy but dynamic environment, and just, pulling something up like engagement metrics and calling it ROI when really what we mean is what's the effectiveness by some standard between one activity and another.
We have a question up here from Nita. For you, Dr. Rogers, how is social marketing failing our experience economy as you define it?
How is social marketing failing? I don't know if I'd say across the board failing, but I would say one of the common failures is creating inauthentic experiences. I was talking this morning with AB InBev, they're Brazilian executives, and they were talking about grappling with this issue of how do you come into a social space as a brand and not sort of offend people by the fact that you're trying to be their friend and you're not really their friend, you're a corporation. And I think it's great that they were asking that question. And I think we all have to keep in mind there's a difference between our, when we friend a brand and on the same platform we friend an actual person, that small network, Dunbar network, influencer. And don't try to behave like you're my personal friend just because I friended you on Facebook. So.
We come back here to one of our hosts.
We are not talking much about Pinterest these last 2 days. Why is it pulling so well relative to its size?
I would jump in and say I think Pinterest defined a design change on the web that's going to last forever, or at least forever is a relative word. It's going to last for the next cycle. So through to this guy's point in the corner. I'm not sure Pinterest itself will be as important as Amazon or as important as Google or Facebook or Twitter. It might be. I don't know if anyone can see through it. But the Pinterest design, even a Facebook wall now, the Facebook profile page looks like a Pinterest layout. I mean, it's pinned posts, and you can pin them, and you can star them. And so that design layout has changed, the same way that feeds completely revolutionized the internet. I think we moved from pages that you browse to and pages that you bookmark to feeds and content that flies around everywhere. And so from my perspective on it, that ends up changing the way you advertise too. Because instead of trying to put a banner in a corner of a page, there are no corners anymore. The page is a fluid layout, and on a Pinterest page, it's all sorts of content, and on a feed, it's feeds. So advertising and native placements change.
Dan had a great demo he showed me backstage. I don't know, you probably can't hold it up and folks see, but
can't
of
see
what
my
he's
phone
talking
from up
about,
here.
this native advertising model where the brand message is in the feed, right? It's right
But
in there.
you're still talking about graphics and messages. I'm back here. Graphics and messages and layout and things like that. I think there's something more fundamental that goes on here. Fred Wilson had a post on Monday about the value of sharing, the same day that Nick Bilton of the New York Times had one about kind of the dangers of sharing, very, very much about an opportunist investor versus a nervous journalist, right? And I think we're not breaking out of the models enough. So I'm going to come back here to a woman named Brianne Garcia. Brianne is one of my star students at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism, now graduate. One of the first 2 people in the country to earn a degree in entrepreneurial journalism to prove it's not an oxymoron. Brianne has a business that she's building that's kind of on the back of Pinterest called Parceled, P-A-R-C-E-L-D. She needs investors. Now done with the plug. Now I want to come to Brianne and say, what about you? What do you have to say about what's been said about Pinterest?
So 3 things. I think that some of the previous people were talking about this, but that user experience is equally as important as social because it's people's actual experience. And I think that Pinterest has actually killed it. I mean, everyone from Zappos to a lot of the social platform or dashboards that I've seen here are using a Pinterest layout to, as you mentioned, to display their content. What it does is that it's a personalized catalog. So the whole idea of native advertising, the whole idea of messaging is it's every person sees, their own personalized catalog when they log on to Pinterest. If they figure out how to give brands power to basically advertise to me and target me, I think they will crush every other.
Based on the knowledge that you've put into Pinterest.
Right, because it's an extension of myself. I share so much. They can collect a ridiculous amount of metadata, and that's where I think that I will go ahead and put it out there, surpass Amazon and Google if they really wanted to.
Thank you. David, you were going to say something. Okay, good, more. Okay, here and then here. Yay.
I find it kind of amazing after more than 15 years of this, because I was doing BBSs for social before Netscape launched, but we still don't talk about segmentation, and we don't talk about what social's good for specifically. And all the kinds of companies that had fans before the internet, like sports teams, do really well with social. And you can be a fan of a fashion brand, and you can be a fan of an energy drink. There are things that people identify with, and I think most of those brands use social very well. It's when you're trying to develop fans for toilet paper and things that aren't naturally, something that we use to identify our personality or that we want to follow, that it falls apart. And when we roll all of that into an average and talk about social as a big glob, we tend to say that it doesn't work so well when it works really well in lots of places.
So it's appropriate. It's part of Dan's point, so the appropriateness and the context.
Yeah, I think any brand can win with quality content, whether you're a toilet paper brand or whether you're Nike or the San Francisco Giants. Go Giants.
I thought you were making an analogy there between toilet paper and the Giants, but that's not.
And I was going to jump in just specifically on what we're doing with video. We have some of our customers, sure, they're Nike, Pepsi, Coke, but some of them are like Clorox or Pfizer. We were talking Pfizer earlier today. Clorox ran a liquid plumber campaign with us. Liquid plumber is something to unclog your drain. I have no brand affinity for liquid plumber, but when I walk in the store, after having seen this 3-minute video that was pretty funny and thoughtful and smart, maybe subconsciously, but somewhere I think this brand must be the best liquid plumber brand because they're the smartest and the funniest, and somehow they've got onto my radar. And they didn't really get there through social, they got there through content.
Yeah, and I would add, I mean, that's basically exactly kind of what we do is we mobilize fan groups on behalf of brands. So, I mean, we take that whole mentality that you have behind a sports team or you have behind a brand you're really passionate about, and we create a platform around that helps brands do that. And we've worked with, sure, you work with a lot of brands that already have kind of that passionate following, but you also work with brands. We've worked with a feminine hygiene brand, and you would think that would be very hard to socialize, but it really comes down to kind of what content and what meaning they can create. So some brands might create educational content that's valuable to their audience, or they might create be part of kind of a broader charity initiative that their people care about. So I think everything is a fight for mind share now. So I mean, if you really want to be relevant and you really want to kind of stick out, you do have to think of those ways that your brand plays in people's lives, and think of ways to make that something that people socialize, because there isn't really a separate social media. It's the world.
I think it's a good point. I think it leads us to bad numbers too. Over here.
Hi, just going back to Pinterest, that my friend there was asking what if the brands put attention in people? There is a case of these feminine napkins. Sorry if my English is not perfect. So it's a feminine napkins brand. I don't remember real name, but what they did was they were trying to reach were the most influencers in Pinterest. So they followed them for a couple of months and then it's a video of this if you look in YouTube. So they send a box with all the kind of things that those women could decide. So there are some brands using Pinterest like this. And other good thing about that I think is you see a Body Shop in Pinterest. They're also doing a really great work because they are not just talking about their products, they are also, they have some boards with some values they want to achieve through. Just a
So I can imagine somewhere in Europe somebody would say, oh, how creepy that you knew something about me on Pinterest and you sent me a bunch of tampons. Other things, okay, other things, right? But the issue we're going to get to here is one of privacy. And as Brianne said a minute ago, she reveals a lot of herself on Pinterest. I think this is where this goes. If you have a relationship, you got to know who the person is and have a relationship with that person. What is do not track going to do to everything that we do here?
Well, I'm not the ad guy, so I'll go first because I have no basis to speak. You know, I think do not track is very interesting because I think it's going to force a conversation about this issue and this kind of often falsely framed debate about privacy. And I think we're going to have to stop talking about privacy and start talking about data. And data is something that, rather than just about ownership, about value and exchange. So if I'm putting data out there, I have to know you're going to do something with it, that I am giving it to you publicly, and that I feel I'm getting some kind of a fair transaction. I was speaking to someone this morning who was really offended when TripIt, you know, the app, you keep track of your travel, and she was using it with LinkedIn. TripIt started sending her promotions. I see you're taking a trip to Barcelona. Would you like this deal? And she said she thought that was creepy, and she hadn't opted in. That was the reason why. By comparison, you know, Nike, with their very successful Nike Fuel, building on previous technologies, is getting customers to voluntarily share all kinds of personal information about, there we go. So Jeff, wearing that band, is not only— How little
I do every day, yes.
He's tracking how little he does every day. No, he's tracking his athletic activity, his energy levels, and he's probably sharing it with friends. And if he does want to share it with friends, he's doing it through Nike's platform. And he's maybe willing to do that because he wants to share this experience and sort of get encouragement and share that experience with people. Obviously, he's giving that data over to Nike for their platform. But he's only doing that willingly because he knows he's getting something in return. And I think that's where advertising data is going to have to go too.
Let's go to this question because I think it ties into this. Can a brand have a relationship, or does the consumer, more importantly, the customer, feel like they have a relationship with the brand? What are your thoughts on that? And anyone, you know, chime in. But this whole idea, we talk about brands having relationships. We're talking. That's us talking. Mm-hmm. That's not the customers. I have never.
Well, customers talk about that when they talk about brands that they're really passionate about. They don't.
Is that the same as relationship?
Yeah.
And does it?
People talk about loving brands, and you know, people talk about Apple, who are really Apple fanatics. People talk about Coke. If you read the things people write on Coke's Facebook wall.
I would say a relationship is really defined as kind of two sides, giving and taking. I think, you know, liking a page on Facebook wouldn't in itself, I think, define a relationship. I mean, I think that's another way of giving your email for a CRM database. It's another way of saying, yes, I'd like to get some more information. But, you know, I think that there's people, you know, with every brand or with most brands that are interested in going beyond that. They want to tell you what they think about your brand, want to help you make it better, make a better product, that want to, that love, I mean, one of our clients, actually, I was really excited, we just, you know, Zicam, which is a product I probably have told more people about in my life. Every time I get sick, every time, you know, I use it, I say it's amazing. Like, I pretty much get rid of my cold, like, without ever having a cold, by using the product, and I continue to find myself talking about it. So, there are people that, I'd love to probably have a relationship with I can, because I am someone who, has.
I think a lot of people feel a relationship with Apple because they love the products. And
Apple is
they're
the grand
touted
exception to every rule.
One of the highest social brands, yet they don't really interact a lot
Right.
socially. And then there's brands here that might interact a lot with their customers. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, okay, how do I create a relationship? Being marketers, we probably don't create the service or the products as much in this room as we do the front end communication. And so, so I'm curious on thoughts on how these brands operationalize relationship. I think we talk about it a lot, but
it's
really
about back here.
Oh.
It's about value, isn't it? It's about value coming back. If there isn't that kind of agreed exchange of value, then there's no relationship.
I was in a lab at Stanford, research lab, for a couple of years called the Persuasive Technology Lab. And I won't take it into a tangent, but it's directly relevant to this. The whole point of the lab was we said for thousands of years, we figured out what persuasion strategies worked human to human. And we've documented all those things like social proof and reciprocity and fear and hope.
Yes.
We said if we replace one of those humans with a computer, or a brand in this case, which persuasion strategies still work, and which ones don't work, but which ones still work. Because if they still work, then you can make it scale. And one of the things we found, and this was just like a recurring theme through every study, whether it was like a mobile study or whether it was a health study, was that reciprocity worked computer to human. So when a computer said, I'm feeling blue today, you would respond back with your actual feelings that you would probably not even tell your friend sitting next to you. I'm feeling depressed because of my wife, or something like that. Or I'm feeling sad because nobody's talking to me today. And so people they'd be open with a brand or with a computer because of that reciprocity. Put in our ad tech lingo that has to do with value exchange and content and sort of the power of giving somebody something and having them give you something back. And so, yeah, I would say for sure.
And it doesn't have to be a
relationships work.
product or a discount or a coupon, to your
It can just be a feeling.
Right.
I mean,
Be
brands make
recognized.
people feel feelings.
We have
People
two
may
back
not make
here.
brands feel
You can't see
feelings.
me, but we have two folks waiting back here, so let me just interrupt if I can.
I think the two most important things any company or brand first has to ask themselves, if they're first solving a problem, if they're solving a problem, then the second thing they should be worrying about is if they're doing it in a sincere manner. If you're doing anything with sincerity, you'll build relationship with everyone that you want to reach out to, and then from there, you'll get your ROI. And as long as you're sincere in every single manner, everything will unfold naturally.
And the first part of that is solving a problem for someone. If you're not making that direct connection with someone, something they actually need, you're nowhere.
I think what we're missing here is people don't develop relationships with the brand. They develop it with the people that represent the brand. Okay, like you're talking human, it is all about human. Death to the machines. Because once we start letting the machines make those responses, then we take the relationship out of it and we take the humanity out of it. So a brand that has humanity empowers their employees to speak for them. That's where the relationships are built. And that's the thing that we're missing in the whole conversation here.
This is 1,000 Robert Scobles. Right? I mean, it's Robert Scoble taught us all.
It's about the people. It's not about the product. It's about the people, and it's about the story and the content and those relationships that allow you. That's what creates the sharing. Without that, there's nothing to share. So marketing is far from dead, because marketing is what creates the story and lays the platform for people to build relationships, to build connection, to reach out to each other, and to share.
Yeah, and I think that's only scaled if you can do that with your consumers. I mean, employees are a great place to start, and I think that that could help. But I think the way that really scales is to build those relationships with consumers that can represent your brand and give them the power to have a more formal relationship.
Employees are the ones that can help you do that.
Right.
And also, it happens a lot more at scale than you think, because what we're all looking at is we're looking at just the small percentage of conversations that are going over. But remember, the bulk of the people are listening. And they're participating vicariously in that relationship building. And they're building relationships between you and me having that conversation. They don't have to be a direct part of the conversation.
We have another back here.
Hi, Melissa Dargis from My Damn Channel. I just want to make a comment that when somebody opts in for content and it's in like a branded entertainment format, that you've already skipped over a few steps in creating that relationship with somebody, because that brand affinity is what is going to propel the brand into all these, different avenues, whether it be Facebook or Twitter, having that conversation with your friends or with your family over dinner. I think the opting in for that specific piece of content, whether it be entertainment or information, is probably the most direct and effective way to make that relationship, because it's not the push
Yeah,
marketing.
I think though it's also one of the easiest places to botch that relationship right out the gate. And to bring back a word somebody mentioned earlier, segmentation. I think one of the biggest data challenges we have right now as large organizations trying to scale this, authenticity or sincerity, is when you get that opt-in, how do you try to get some insight and try to segment what people are opting in for, what they're interested in, so that your follow-up, your next interaction with them is less likely to cross the line or sort of annoy them or seem irrelevant, because not everybody who wants to see that one video is going to want to say, hear the second follow-up from you the same way. So the more we can learn more about our customers and customize these kinds of interactions that we're having with them. I mean, I give the example, email, spam, all the time. I mean, I sign up for a service or register for something, and then they just start spamming me with obviously the same email they're sending to every single person on their mailing list, and I instantly unsubscribe. Versus McKinsey Quarterly does a very good job. First time I read an article of theirs that I had to register for, instead of just letting me register, I had to tell them what topics and what industries I was interested in. Guess what? I don't get very many emails from McKinsey Quarterly. They only email me when they have something that's exactly on the topic I care about. They send me something every 3 or 4 months. Guess what? I open those emails. I not only didn't unsubscribe, I don't delete them, I actually have an ongoing connection with them. So segmentation is critically important as we try to scale content.
But I think the other point is that human relationships are very important. How many, has anyone here not read, be honest, the Clue Train Manifesto?
Not read?
For those of you who haven't
finished it, I'll be honest.
Read it, right? Because it said this 12 years ago, that markets are conversations and conversations are held by people, and we can tell the difference between a person and a machine or an algorithm or a formula having the conversation with us. And that's really what we're talking about all day today, I think, is people having conversations with people. It's that simple in the end. And back to our first challenger, it's not a fad then if we do it right. It's just
Well, the problem is when people get inside a company, they forget that they're a person almost.
Or they're not allowed
right?
to.
The way they talk, this came up, hey social, hey marketing, you're so inauthentic. How do you get the company and the people in the company? Ted did it for his company. He was the voice. So few companies have that. How do you get that so that either one person or several people can have that in a relationship?
Or here's the question that was asked in the back. Should you enable every single employee in your company to talk with the world? What do you think?
Well, beyond that, I think you should enable your consumers to talk with the world. But yes,
Okay.
I mean, I think the reach of people that are interested in your brand that you can openly communicate with, leverage them. I don't think you can kind of hold people back. Leverage those voices. If I want to scream from the rooftops about Zycam, they should give me the tools. They'll make that easier for me to do.
Some brands. I think if you're at Coke or Pepsi or consumer brand, I think it makes sense for everybody there who can consume the product and talk about it publicly. At a company like ours, maybe that's too meta when you start talking about open social media marketing from a social media company. I'm not sure everybody is like in the weeds enough to even have a relevant ad tech conversation at the level we want to have it. Some of our folks are building product and some folks are doing other things. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're a major consumer brand, fearless transparency to me is the way of the future.
All right, let me end here, David, because we're about out of time. Is there, back to measurement, are there measurements we're totally missing? Are there new measurements, things we ought to be measuring to try to find out if we do have good relationships with people, if we do have a good value going back and forth? What else should we be studying to measure here?
I don't think we need more metrics. I think we need to change our culture and our organizational setup about how we use metrics. We need to stop looking for some sort of silver bullet, some magic formula that's going to be a cross-platform ROI model for all our marketing efforts. 70% of CMOs in the study we just did reported that they were looking for that. And I think it's a pipe dream. Metrics needs to be something that you are educating and training and embedding in the culture. Everyone is doing it all the time. Constantly trying, experimenting with different ways to measure every initiative you come out with. There is no perfect metric solution, just like you guys were talking about. Don't wait till the product is perfect. Iterate. Start measuring from the beginning. The one finding we found that had the greatest correlation with organizations that had success in measuring marketing ROI was just that they had been doing it longer. The more years you've been trying it, the better your success rate is. So get started, make it everyone's job. There are tons of metrics out there. The real challenge is building these models, being nimble, thinking about for each specific initiative you do, what's the right mix of metrics to see how close you're getting to that initiative's objectives.
All right, I want to thank everyone and thank especially our panel and our Twitter fans, and thank you so very much. So, on to the next.